tonight, U.S. forces hunt down a terrorist network in Afghanistan while 8 Americans die at a remote outpost as the debate over U.S. policy heats up. I'm Russ Mitchell. Also tonight, millions of doses of H1N1 flu vaccine arrive this week as thousands of health workers fight mandatory vaccination orders.
I don't want to feel like someone's telling me what to put into my body.
Meet the co-founder of Twitter, the instant messaging system that Wall Street says is worth $1 billion. And the American spirit, an exclusive look at how one man overcame incredible odds to conquer Mount Kilimanjaro.
This is the CBS Evening News with Russ Mitchell.
And good evening. We begin tonight with the growing debate over the war in Afghanistan and today's grim news from the war's front lines. An insurgent attack on 2 outposts near Pakistan has killed 8 U.S. soldiers, the biggest American loss in more than a year. The deaths put the U.S. toll this year to 238, the highest annual death toll of the war. American troops have been on the offensive as well. Our Mandy Clark has been embedded with the U.S. mission in eastern Afghanistan.
These U.S. troops are hunting down Jalaluddin Haqqani's terrorist network in eastern Afghanistan. Haqqani, one of America's most wanted men, was once courted by the CIA. Now he's accused of killing American soldiers. A local tribes leader, Haqqani is linked to al-Qaeda and allegedly operates from a safe haven in Pakistan. On these targeted missions, they're hunting the bomb makers and their materials. So far, they've found 4 weapons caches, detained about 7 suspects, and even on some missions where they find nothing, it's still a show of force in the heart of Haqqani territory. U.S. forces call this network the most dangerous threat to Afghan security.
You know when you're fighting Haqqani based on them coming together in the size of force and then how committed they are, how close they'll get up to you and fight you.
I got 14 dudes.
This Apache helicopter gunship camera video shows Haqqani fighters trying to escape after an attack on a U.S. base this summer in the mountains of eastern Paktia province. The Apache and the troops on the ground hunted them down. All the fighters were killed.
And I was actually the one talking to the Apaches at that moment. They just did it by the book and made it successful.
As winter begins to take hold, the U.S. military believes many Haqqani fighters in eastern Afghanistan will head to neighboring Pakistan for more training.
As he goes away, you know, we're still here working with the people and creating that environment that it's going to look different next year when he comes back.
As the traditional fighting season ends, the number of attacks against U.S. forces is expected to fall. But now they will start a different mission, convincing Haqqani tribesmen to turn their backs on their leader and set their weapons down. Mandy Clark, CBS News, Zormat, Eastern Afghanistan.
And this weekend's deaths bring the total number of American casualties in Afghanistan to 868. As the White House continues to take another look at U.S. strategy, voices from several sides were heard today, and the pressure to make a decision is growing. Kimberly Dozier has more.
4 soldiers returned from Afghanistan to Dover late last night, met with silent honors and waiting loved ones. President Obama says these rising losses are why he's taking his time deciding his next move there. Americans remain divided over Afghanistan. A recent CBS News poll shows about a third want more troops, a third want the status quo, and about a third want troops out. The president's war cabinet meets twice again this week to advise him.
The president should be presented with options, not just one fait accompli.
His top commander in Afghanistan, General Stanley McChrystal, wants to continue with a counterinsurgency strategy. That means protecting the Afghans, but it requires up to 40,000 more U.S. troops. A group led by Vice President Joe Biden is backing a pared-down counterterrorism fight. Fewer troops who would target the insurgents and focus less on Afghan security. The National Security Advisor said today the decision will be made in a matter of weeks.
We have time on the president's schedule. He's going to devote an enormous amount of his time to lead us through this.
But any increase in troops is already facing opposition on Capitol Hill.
I would not commit to more combat troops at this time. What we need a surge of is Afghan troops.
Supporters of General McChrystal's strategy say training enough Afghans takes time, so Americans are needed to fill the gap.
Give the general what he needs. You see, you have to have security in Afghanistan, you have to have governance in Afghanistan.
He warns without it, the Taliban will take back control.
When I asked General Jones, did it necessarily follow that if the Taliban comes back, al-Qaeda comes with them? He said, well, that's hypothetical. What do you think?
Just like water running down a hill. They're going to come back in.
Now, the debate is said to be civil in front of the president, but it gets pretty heated away from him. Those in favor of counterterrorism tell me that committing more American troops risks committing America to a quagmire. But a senior McChrystal advisor tells me if the president doesn't commit to those troops, he's risking another attack on American soil. Russ?
Kimberly Dozier at the White House. Thank you very much. And a reminder now that our special 3-day in-depth series, Afghanistan, The Road Ahead, begins tomorrow on The Early Show and on the CBS Evening News. Indonesian officials now say there is little hope of finding more survivors from last week's massive earthquake. The UN says that quake killed at least 1,100. Hundreds are still missing after the 7.6 magnitude quake on the island of Sumatra. CBS News correspondent Celia Hatton went to the unexplored quake zone to bring us the latest.
5 days after a pair of deadly earthquakes struck the Indonesian island of Sumatra, and some are still digging for buried bodies using their bare hands. Rescue crews are straining to reach uncharted quake territory. Our CBS News crew flew to Padang Alai, a remote district north of most aid operations.
These soldiers have just landed in an area that's been hit by landslides. No one's visited here yet.
The troop works quickly to set up a makeshift landing platform for more helicopters to come carrying supplies. The locals are relieved to see help arrive. We didn't know how we were going to survive if aid didn't come, admits this woman. 30 people in this small area were killed in the quake, buried under landslides or falling debris. After the earthquake, everything stopped working, communications and transportation, says this farmer. The farmer's wife was inside this damaged house when the quake struck. The shaking started and suddenly the house collapsed, she explains. I ended up lying down on the floor. She escaped, but 3 others in the house were crushed to death. Their bodies are still inside because the villagers can't shift the heavy concrete.
These provisions have just been dropped off, including instant noodles, high-energy biscuits, and tarps.
For this young crowd, no time's wasted tearing into the cookies. And for their parents, finally a reminder the outside world hasn't forgotten them. Celia Hatton, CBS News, Padang Alai, Indonesia.
As we end this first weekend of October, there is news that the first doses of the H1N1 vaccine will be released this week. While that is bringing some relief to some Americans, it's also helping to ignite a controversy for one group. Randall Pinkston has more.
Outside New York's Capitol building, healthcare workers vowed to fight an unprecedented order from state health officials. Every healthcare worker in the state must get seasonal and H1N1 flu shots or face the possibility of being fired. Physical therapist Carol Blueweiss is weighing that risk.
I don't want to feel like someone's telling me what to put into my body.
But the state maintains the objective is to reduce the possibility of infecting patients.
Every flu season in New York, for example, we have about 160 outbreaks of flu inside healthcare institutions.
In past years, when vaccination was voluntary, only 40% of the state's 525,000 healthcare workers got their shots.
And that's kind of intolerable that patients should come to a hospital and not know that the healthcare workers are vaccinated.
But Blueweiss, who plans to give her son the seasonal vaccine, doesn't trust H1N1 for him or herself. In her 15 years at a large New York hospital, she says she's never gotten a flu shot and never had the flu.
It's just outrageous, and it feels criminal, and it feels anti-American.
While New York has the only statewide mandate, a number of private and public hospitals around the nation are also requiring employees to take flu shots, including the 273 facilities of the Hospital Corporation of America, Emory Hospital in Atlanta, the University of Pennsylvania Hospital, the University of Maryland Medical Center, and Loyola University Health System in Chicago. There's also strong resistance from the general public. A new Harvard University poll finds only 4 in 10 adults intend to take the vaccine. Randall Pinkston, CBS News, New York.
For more perspective on the flu vaccine debate, We are joined by our medical correspondent, Dr. John LaPook. Good evening, John. Good to see you.
Good, Russ.
As we just heard from Randall, a lot of Americans are concerned about the H1N1 vaccine, concerned about safety. Do they have a point?
Well, you know, one of the big problems, Russ, is that people think that this is some kind of experimental, brand new vaccine. And it isn't. The CDC has told me this vaccine for H1N1 is being made the exact same way that the regular seasonal flu vaccine is. There's no shortcuts. And so far they say it's safe and effective, but they're going to let us know if that changes.
As a medical professional, will you give your family the vaccine? Will you advise them to take it?
Here's how I think about it, okay? What are the risks of getting a complication from the vaccine, which we know from past experience with seasonal flu vaccine is very, very tiny, versus what are the risks of getting really sick if you happen to be lucky and unlucky enough to get the flu? And the risk of dying if you get the flu is about 1 in 1,000. Every year, people don't realize this, Russ, 36,000 Americans die every year from the flu. So the risk-benefit seems obvious, the CDC says, to get it. And they're saying that the risk-benefit profile will probably be the same thing for H1N1. So for my kids and my family, they're getting it.
Okay, having said that, I think I know the answer to this one, but Dr. LaPook, how about you? Will you get the vaccine?
It's a no-brainer for health professionals, okay? For two reasons. One is we have an obligation to stay healthy, to take care of our patients. And number two, we can't be spreading the H1N1 virus and the regular seasonal flu virus to our patients who are sick, especially those people in the hospital who may have compromised immune systems. So I'm definitely getting both the regular seasonal flu vaccine, which, by the way, I got last week, and the H1N1 when it comes out.
Okay, Dr. John LaPook, as always, thank you so much. And it's still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, why Wall Street gets the October jitters. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed Friday at just under 9,500, capping a second straight weekly loss. Still, the index has shot up 45% since last March, but there are still jitters on Wall Street because for decades, October has given financial markets a wild ride. Hari Srinivasan has more.
As if on cue, the first 2 days in October were marked by a 2% drop in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, a jittery start to a month riddled with history and superstition in the financial markets.
The history suggests October is a scary month legitimately for the market.
Last year, October saw a 15% decline. The two most dramatic single-day stock crashes in history came in this month. October 29, 1929, the Dow dropped 12.8%. And on October 19, 1987, the Dow dropped a breathtaking 22.6% in a single trading session. But the 10th month has also seen 11 bear market turnarounds. In 2002, a long stock slide caused by the dot-com bust turned around in October and began a climb upward.
There are some fundamental things that tend to go on in October that can create extra volatility in the market.
October's financial jitters date back to the 1800s. At harvest time, money would leave the city's major banks to pay for food and grain. That put the squeeze on the financial markets, making them vulnerable to panics.
We stopped being an agrarian society a long time ago, and yet that historic calendar pattern continues.
In today's markets, October is a critical financial reporting month.
The reason that October is a little wacky, if you will, is there's so much news in October. It's the time when companies report third-quarter earnings.
This year, analysts and traders are bracing for corporate results.
October this year is important because we're going to find out the truth.
And that truth is, if earnings are robust, the recovery is likely on track. If earnings are lackluster, it'll be a long, slow road to economic health. Hari Srinivasan, CBS News, New York.
A growing California wildfire has charred 3,500 acres in the San Gabriel Mountains and is only 10% contained. Up to 6,000 residents have been ordered to evacuate. The fire is fanned by 45-mile-an-hour winds. 3 homes have been destroyed. Just ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, the man who helped put the tweets in those Twitter instant messages. Wall Street recently put a value on the social network Twitter at $1 billion, even though the company has yet to make a dime. At the same time, Twitter has become a household word. And that's tonight's Sunday cover. The rise of Twitter and the young man who helped invent it.
You started with 5 tweeters, essentially.
Yes.
And now you've got something like 40 million?
A huge number.
In your wildest dreams 3 years ago, did you have any idea that this many people would be using Twitter?
I knew that the concept would be huge, but we did not know that it would be adopted so suddenly in under 3 years. That's what's amazing. Step one is just.
Here's what else is amazing. Jack Dorsey was only 29 years old when he invented Twitter, and now, at 32, it's clear he's helped change the way we communicate.
You can follow me on Twitter at twitter.com.
At its most basic level, Twitter is an instant messaging system that allows users to text to a single person or thousands of other users at once. Messages, nicknamed tweets, always begin by answering the question, "What are you doing?"
I wouldn't know a Twitter from a tweeter, but apparently it is very important.
In fact, many politicians use Twitter to communicate with voters. It was even used by protesters during the recent elections in Iran to get their message out to the world.
I'll do the one with chocolate icing.
And it's really taking off with companies who find it a perfect way to get close to their customers.
And I want my cupcake, and I want to know where it's going to be.
Like this mobile bakery in New York City.
We use it to get reviews and comments about our cupcakes. We use it for pretty much anything and everything.
Why do you think people like it?
It just makes everything I interact with more human. It makes everything I interact with more approachable. Thank you.
And Dorsey has become a superstar. He was honored last month in his hometown of St. Louis, where he spoke at Webster University, got the key to the city from the mayor, and threw out the first pitch at the St. Louis Cardinals game. Dorsey says his proudest moment came during President Obama's speech to Congress earlier this year, as lawmakers gave their own running commentary via Twitter during the address. And yet much of Twitter involves the mundane, a stream of updates about life's little moments.
Do I really need to know that Joe in Seattle is having oatmeal for breakfast this morning? Is there such a thing as too much information?
There is such a thing as too much information, but it's all how you approach it. The best thing about this technology is that it's completely recipient controlled. So yes, Joe is having oatmeal, or I'm having oatmeal, and it's meaningless to the most of the world, but it's very meaningful to my mom. Even for someone like Barack Obama to update, "I'm eating oatmeal," it makes him more human. Those small details of life really bring him down to everyone else's level and allows people to relate to him.
Jack Dorsey says he came up with Twitter because he was always fascinated by maps and how cities function. He remains chairman of Twitter, but says he'll announce plans for a new company later this year. We'll be back. Here at CBS News, we are celebrating the enduring spirit of individual Americans. Tonight, we focus on Chris Waddell. 21 years after he was paralyzed in a skiing accident, Waddell took on the most grueling challenge of his life. Karen Brown now on the American spirits in action.
With brute force and unyielding determination, Chris Waddell triumphed over Mount Kilimanjaro.
It's just sort of a sense of astonishment.
It was a grueling 7-day climb for the 41-year-old paraplegic on a custom-made four-wheel mountain bike. With just his arms and his courage, at times only moving a foot a minute up the 19,340-foot mountain. Via phone from Tanzania, he compared it to drowning a few feet from shore.
It looks absolutely physically brutal.
You know, you feel like you're just digging trenches and not going anywhere.
Sometimes assisted by a winch, other times helped by a team of 50 who use boards like railroad tracks to give him traction. He trained for 2 years in Colorado and told us before he left he was ready. But less than 2,000 feet from the summit, this Paralympic champion hit a field of boulders even he couldn't get over. Instead of turning back, he made a tough choice and asked to be carried for just 100 feet. But that meant he wouldn't become the first paraplegic to do it entirely on his own.
Was there a moment of heartbreak?
There was that sense of heartbreak and that sense of a little bit of defeat at that point, but I think it was, you know, the idea was to make it to the top.
Waddell survived the equally difficult trip down.
Going down is just, it's so punishing.
He kept going for himself and for children like 9-year-old Masufu, who are helped by Waddell's One Revolution Foundation and his example. He wants people to see past the limitations to the possibilities.
People look at the next person with a disability that they see, and it's not a matter of, oh, that's too bad. You can do whatever you want, I guess, is what I'm saying.
He climbed to the tallest peak in Africa to be heard. Karen Brown, CBS News, New York.
Truly amazing. And that is the CBS Evening News. I'm Russ Mitchell. Katie's here tomorrow. Good night.